Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to look at having lists that have a custom formatting for the items. So the goal of this tutorial is we want to start with a list of objects in an array, and we want to be able to create a list view that represents each of those objects in some kind of custom way. So the objects could, for example, be emails, or they could be books with titles of books, or products in some kind of online shop, or anything like that. So I've got a Hello World application set up here, and let's start with some kind of list of objects that we want to represent visually in a list. So I'll create some kind of object here. Let's take as an example, let's take like a list of emails, and just to keep this simple, I'll just have the sender of the email and the title of the message, and I'll display those in a list. So I'll create a message class that can represent messages for a start. And let's get rid of this main here, we don't need that. And I'll give it a private string sender field and a private string title field. So this is just kind of like a bean class that just stores the sender and the title of an email, and of course in real life it would store the contents and other stuff as well. Now I'm just going to right click here and go to source, override implement methods. Actually that's not the one I want. The one I want is source and generate getters and setters. So I'll generate getters and setters for these values, and I'll also, let's right click here and go to source, generate constructors. Where are we? Source. I want to generate a constructor automatically, so generate constructor using fields, and I'll tick those two. And there we go. So there is my constructor. And actually I'll move this to the top, and I'll just format this with Ctrl-Shift-F. So this is just kind of like a really simple bean class that can store bits of data. And in my main activity now, I'm going to imagine that I'm going to get a list of emails from somewhere. So let's actually have a method here called let's call it something like setup email list, and I'll call that from onCreate, and I'll just implement that method here. And let's imagine to keep things simple that we've got this list of messages from somewhere. So for the moment I'll just create some messages here. So let's say list message. So I'm just using Java util list here to store some messages, and I'll call this messages equals new array list of messages, like this. And let's add a few messages from this list to this list. So I'll have a comment here saying retrieve these messages from somewhere. And in reality here I'm just gonna make them up. So let's say messages.add new message, and for the constructor I supply first the sender, so let's say Bob Smith, and the title, my cat has gone missing. And I'll just have like just a few more of those. Let's just see what this error is. Oh yeah, it should be messages.add. So that's okay. Let's just have a few more messages just for testing purposes. So I'll paste in a few more of these, and I'll have Bob Smith, Sue, Blake, let's say Mike, Peters, and Sarah Rogers. And I'll just have a few different titles here. So this could be special offer, and read any good books, ? And is the canteen on fire, ? Typical messages that you get during the day when you're at work. And now, so I want to take these messages and put them in a list using some custom formatting, and we'll look at some really simple formatting in this tutorial, and then in the next couple of tutorials we're going to look at styling this list, and we're going to look at using icons in this list as well. So I'll break this up into a few separate tutorials, and here we'll just really deal with the code part more than anything, rather than the formatting too much. So let's create for this. Now I've got a list. Well, actually I haven't got a list yet. So let's do that. Let's create a list. So at the moment I've got this Hello World application, and it's just got a text view in it. And I'm going to replace this text view here with a list view like this. And the list view doesn't need it doesn't need too many fields to get it started. I just need I need an ID for it. So let's say ID, and I'll call the ID email list, and I'll give it a layout width of match parent, and I'll give it a layout height of wrap content, so it's just high enough to display the items in it. And then in my main activity I can get a handle to that list by saying list view equals, and I just use find view by ID r.id dot email list, and that will get me a handle to my list. Now to transform these items into something that I can put in a list, I need to use some kind of adapter, and we've seen array adapter so far, which can just take it can take any kind of item basically, as long as that item has a toString method, it can take that and display it in its list. But if you want to display something a bit more fancy than just a bunch of strings in your list, like here I want to display at least 2 strings for each item, and later on we want to add an icon as well, then you need to create your own adapter, and the function of the adapter is to basically change these objects into items in your list. So let's create an adapter here. I'm going to right click and go to new class, and I'll call this message adapter, because it's going to adapt messages into list items. And I'll say that this extends base adapter. Let's get rid of this main method, which I keep putting in by accident, and I'm going to make it implement. So implements list adapter. So list adapter has a whole bunch of methods, but some of them are implemented by base adapter here, so I'll make use of that. And having added those imports there, I'll now click this message and go to add unimplemented methods. And now all we have to do now is implement these methods basically. So I'm going to give this a constructor. Let's give it a constructor public. Well, I'll create a place to store the list of messages in this list adapter. So I'll say private list message, and let's call this messages. And now I can create a constructor here that expects a list of messages. So I can go to right click, source, generate constructor using fields, and just use message here. So here's my constructor, and I don't need to pass the list of messages in from somewhere else. I could have this message adapter actually get the messages itself, but for the moment, for this tutorial, I'll just pass them in when I create it. So now back in the main activity here, I've got my list of messages, and I can create my adapter. I can say message message adapter equals new message adapter, and I can pass in my messages like this. And then after I get my list, I can say list view dot set adapter and pass in the adapter. And at this point later on, I can now say handle on item click. But I won't do that in this tutorial because we've seen how to handle item clicks before. What I'll do now is I'll just handle the formatting of these objects in the list. So I've created my custom adapter and I've told the list to use that adapter, and now I need to do a bit more work on this. And the custom adapter, this should be called messages actually, just at the moment just stores a reference to my list of messages that I pass in from outside. Now to actually format these messages, I'm going to have to create some custom XML. But before we do that, let's already handle the methods that we can. So get count here, that's going to return a number of messages, which is going to be just messages.size. So that's pretty simple. That's just the number of items in my list. And get item is going to have this should return the actual item, so from the list. So I can say here return messages dot get and position. That's pretty simple, just returning stuff from this array list of messages here. Get item ID, you don't really have to implement this, and I think ArrayList adapter actually, if you use strings, will just return -1, but usually you do want to have an ID for each of the items in your list. So let's here give it an ID. I'll say private int ID, and I'll right click here and go to source, override, go to source, generate getters and setters, there we go, and I'll generate a getter and setter for ID. So just get ID and set ID, and in main activity, well actually let's go to message again, and let's also have int ID here and say this.id equals ID in the constructor. And actually maybe it's nicer if I have the ID, which is in a way the most important but also a very short field, as the first argument in the constructor. And then I can say when I create the messages, I can give each one an ID. So let's just say 0, 1 and 2 and 3. So each message now has an ID as well as a sender and a title. And in my message adapter now I can say here return messages, well let's get the yeah actually that should work, messages.get position.get ID. So I'm just returning the ID of each message, and as I say, you don't really have to implement that, it's not vital, just implement it if you want to use it basically. And usually you do want to use it because in on click you probably want to get the ID of an object in your list rather than any text that the user sees. So and now finally we've got this get view, and this is where the interesting stuff happens. And what we need to return here is some kind of a kind of list item view that represents the items in the list. It will represent a particular item in the list given by this position, and I need to create some XML that will format the list item. And as I say, we're going to look at colors and icons in the subsequent tutorials, but here I'm just concerned with arranging the text on screen in a kind of pleasing fashion. So I'm going to go to layout here, and I'm going to go to right click. I'm going to right click and go to new Android XML file, and I'm going to say that I want to create an XML layout here based on linear layout for the moment, and I'm going to call this message, let's call it list message item, something like that. and click Finish. Now let's take a look at that XML. So I'll look at the raw kind of view rather than this designer, which I'm not too keen on. And so we've got a linear layout base tag there, and now I'm going to just put for the moment 2 text views in here that are going to represent the sender and the message title, and I just want to put those underneath each other. So I think what I'll do is I'll keep this vertical linear layout, but I'll change it to horizontal. And what I have in mind is that I'm going to end up with an icon on the left, and then on the right 2 bits of text, the sender and the title, underneath each other. So this is going to be more complicated than it needs to be just for the moment, but I'm going to nest another linear layout in here with I'll say layout.width for the moment equals match parent, and the layout height is going to be wrap content, and the orientation here is going to be vertical. So and I could already actually put a image view in here, so I'm going to have an image view here that's going to hold an icon ultimately, but for the moment I'm not going to use anything in that image view. So I think I'm allowed just to have a kind of blank one as a placeholder, so I'll leave that there for the moment. And in this vertical linear layout I'm going to have 2 text views. So my first text view here, let's give this the ID of title, like this. So maybe I'll call it list title, or list list message title. That's a good idea. And I'll say that this the width of it is going to be, so layout width is going to be match parent, let's say for the moment, and the layout height wrap content. And you can sort of fiddle with all this stuff later, of course. And just for the moment, although we're going to replace this in subsequent tutorials, I'm going to specify a text color, just so we can kind of see something happening. I'm going to say text color, and let's say that the text color is going to be here I can hard code a color, which isn't really good practice, but I will just for the moment. And you can specify colors using, you type a hash and then you have a 6-digit or 8-digit if you want to specify transparency, but for non-transparent colors, just a 6-digit hexadecimal value. And the way it works is the first 2 numbers are red, which I'll set at 00, and then green, for which I'll have FF, and blue, which I'll set to 00 again. So this is going to be kind of ugly colouring, but I just want to demonstrate this working. And I'll also set the background here, and let's set that to black, so 000000. And I'll set the text size here as well. And let's set this to maybe, I don't know, let's try 16 device independent pixels, 16 dp. And I'll copy that, and I'll have another one of those underneath within this. Actually, yeah, I want to set this, this in a linear layout is set to vertical, so these are going to be underneath each other here. And I'm going to set the layout, the text size here to 14 maybe, and I'll leave the other things the same, and we'll see how that looks. So the bottom line is I've got just some layout XML, and I've got at the moment an image view that I'm not doing anything with for the moment, and I've got a couple of text views, one underneath the other here for the title and the sender. So I'm going to give this an ID here of list message sender. Now in my message adapter here, for each item I need to get for a start the XML that I want to turn into the list item, and to do that I'm going to need, well, it will help if I pass to my constructor the activity that I'm calling it from. Let's activities implement the context interface. So I'm going to say context here, and we'll see why in just a minute. And here I'll say private context, and here I'll say this dot context equals context. So we're just storing a reference to the context from the constructor. And back in main activity now, I can pass in this context because activities implement that context interface. And in my adapter now, because I've got a reference to the context, I can now use that to get the XML layout by saying context.get get resource. Oh yeah, come to think of it, I won't get the XML directly, but I do need this because I need to say context.get system service and then context.layout inflator service, because what I need here is I need an inflator service object which is capable of finding my XML and turning it into a list item. So here I'll say layout inflator equals, and we'll cast the return type of get system service to layout inflator, and I'll add the import there and save that. So if I expand this now, so we're just using the context. You could call get system service directly if you're in an activity, but we're not here, so I had to pass the activity in as this context and pass context.layout inflator service, and that will get you a layout inflator. And you can then say inflator.inflate, and here I can pass in the ID of my XML, which is going to be r.layout, let's take a look at where I put that actually. Let's just comment this out, save everything, and so I've got this list message item and it's got an error on it actually. So let's have a look at this error, and string type's not allowed here. Oh yeah, what I did wrong was let's just cut this, because I need to say here, I'll use the autocomplete, and I need to say @+ID/ and then the ID, like that. So let's just copy that and paste it into here as well and save that. So your ID for your XML won't be generated in r.java until you've got rid of any syntax errors in it, and that's the problem that I was having there. So now I've done that. Now I can say inflator in my message adapter here. I can use the inflator to say r.layout. Here we go, list message item, and that refers to my XML there. And for the root, I'll just pass null here. And this returns a view. So if I hover over inflate here, it returns a view object. So I can say view equals inflator.inflate, and then I can return the view, and that's going to return me basically the inflated version, the kind of list item view version of my XML. Now there's just one little more thing that I want to do here, just to get this working as a minimal kind of example, which is I want to say in the view, I want to get my actual text items so that I can set the message sender and the message subject in it. So here get view is going to be called by the system, and it's going to pass in the position of the item to display, and I can now say message, which is the message object that I defined, the message class, message equals, and I've got my list of messages up here, which I could also just be retrieving dynamically inside this adapter, and I can say messages.get, because it's an array list, and pass in the position. So I've got the message now that I want to display, and I can say like string title equals message.getTitle, because I implemented this getTitle messaging here, and I can say string sender equals message.getSender, because I implemented that method in message as well. And now I can say in here text view title view equals, and I want to find the text view here. I want to find this text view, the sender text view, within this layout, and this layout has been inflated into this view by the inflator, which is kind of a list item view. So I can say view, which is the actual view of this particular item, view dot find view by ID, and I can pass in the ID r.id dot of the message title in this case, yeah, because this is the title view here, and I need to cast the return type of that to a text view and add the import for text view like that. There we go, and it's a text view, of course, because that's what I'm finding here. It's a text view. And I'll do the same again for my my message subject. And I appreciate that this is a hell of a lot of stuff to take in, and I'm going through a complete example from scratch here, so that because I figured if I built on previous tutorials, there's even more chance that I'm going to lose you here. But this is going to be a fairly self-contained example that you can look at again if you need to. So I've got the title there, and now I need the sender. So the ID of that is list message sender, and let's call this sender view. And now finally, so I've got those two text views, and now I can say title view dot set text, and I can pass in the title that I got from my message, and sender view dot set text, and I can pass in the sender that I got from my message list. Now if I've got all this right, this might actually work. So let's run this, click run, and to quickly review what I've done is, so I had a list of messages that I got from somewhere, and in this case I just hard coded them myself just for this example, and I created a custom message adapter, and I told my list view to use that adapter, and the list view of course is defined in my main activity layout, and then the message adapter itself implements list adapter and extends the base adapter class. And I passed in my list of messages, but I could have gotten them in the adapter itself. And most of these methods were almost intuitive to implement, and the get view is the tricky one, and that's where you need to get a layout inflator using a reference to your activity which you can pass in, and then inflate your XML, and then find the relevant bits that you want to change here for the particular item in your list item XML, and then just return it. And your list item XML is just something that formats one single item in your list. Now I think I've got an error there, so it says sorry, and that it's stopped, and you see there's red text down here, so I've done something slightly wrong, and I'm going to go to the top of this red text here, and let's take a look. You must supply a layout width attribute on line 7 in my XML, and I think in fact what I've done here is, let's go to my list XML. I suspect that line 7 is in fact this dummy image view that I put in here. Let's actually just get rid of that for the moment, and I'll implement it later, although this, as it says, that nested layout is useless without having something else there. But let's just run that, because I just want to get this working for the moment. So I click run and take a look at the console, and it says starting activity. Now finally we've got our custom list items, and we could add an on item click listener there. Now you'll notice firstly that they don't look all that great. They've just got green text, and my list message item.xml that formats these items, it's got hard-coded colours in it, which isn't good, and they also don't seem to respond when you click on them. And we're going to fix all those things in the next tutorial, although for many purposes this would probably be enough for you. But what we're going to do is we're going to add an icon, and we're going to format these messages a little bit more, and I'm going to make them flash when you click on them as well. So that's more than enough for this tutorial, and I hope I didn't lose you too much there. And of course you can go through it again, and if you type this stuff out for yourself, believe me, it will start to make a lot more sense than if you're just looking at it in a video. So that's it for this tutorial, and until next time, happy coding.